that is a concern also. Are you inadvertently looking to bias an AI in a particular direction? Nothing to say that here, but this goes to that larger concern when you start to bring some of these things in there, and what is the appropriate role in those particular situations. Apologies for having no content up last week. I was actually away on vacation. So I'm getting back into it with things going on, and I figured this might be a good place to start. I talked about before on different videos about how, well, AI seems to be a mess of STEM's own making, if you will, because, well, it does come out of science, technology, engineering, and medicine, and mathematics, if you use the double M version of STEM anyway. It is a creation of science and technology, as it were. And so now, of course, we're seeing not just artistic world and things like that wrestling with the ramifications of that, but also much of the rest of the different factors in society. And that includes all of us who are involved and vested as scientists in the scientific community. And so starting to see articles like this one pop up from Scientific American, too much trust in AI poses unexpected threats to the scientific process. And so it's no surprise to see an article like this starting to appear as scientists themselves are wrestling with, what do we do with this thing that has been created by our discipline, as it were. What was more interesting to me was actually seeing this particular article arise in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. And the reason this article came about was because there was a number of different groups that met together and recognizing the potential challenges of AI in science, wanting to address some of that. And so this would be an interesting article to read because they are proposing that AI be used in line with 5 standards of human accountability, as it were. But let's go through this a little bit. I'm going to attempt to keep this brief, but we shall see how it goes. Revolutionary advances in AI have brought us to a transformative moment for science. AI is accelerating scientific discoveries and analyses. This is a true statement because the amount of data that's there, AI is actually extremely helpful for parsing through all of that data and getting new analyses done in a timely manner. At the same time, its tools and processes challenge core norms and values in the conduct of science, including accountability, transparency, replicability, and human responsibility. These difficulties are particularly apparent in recent advances with generative AI. Future innovations with AI may mitigate some of these or raise new concerns and challenges. With scientific integrity and responsibility in mind, the National Academy of Sciences, the Annenberg Public Policy Center of the University of Pennsylvania, and the Annenberg Foundation Trust at Sunnylands recently convened an interdisciplinary panel of experts with experience in academia, industry, and government to explore rising challenges posed by the use of AI in research and to chart a path forward for the scientific community. The panel included experts in behavioral and social sciences, ethics, biology, physics, chemistry, mathematics, and computer science, as well as leaders in higher education, law, governance, and science publishing and communication. Now, I've talked about in the past with what's happened with science publishing, such as the fraudulent articles that have been produced with ChatGPT and the like. That is a very relevant reason why we're thinking about this, is because, well, I've said it before and I'll say it again. If you're using ChatGPT to write your articles, I'm sorry, that's not your article because it is a regenerative thing. It's usually ripping off the text of others to regenerate the text into something else. So in other words, it's not your creative mind that's involved in that in terms of the writing. And I do say creative mind there quite deliberately because it does take a lot of creativity to condense a tremendous amount of analysis into a readable format for others to understand, even if they are some technical experts in the same field as yourself, let alone a journal where it has to have a wide reach to a much broader audience than just those same technical experts that you share common knowledge and nomenclature with. Discussions were informed by commissioned papers detailing the development and current state of AI technologies, the potential effects of AI advances on equality, justice, and research ethics, emerging governance issues, lessons that can be learned from past instances where the scientific community addressed new technologies with significant societal importance. Let's see. I'm going to skip that particular paragraph. But generative AI's power to interact with scientists in a natural manner to perform unprecedented types of problem solving. I want to say, what is a natural manner anyway? But, what is AI interacting with scientists in a natural manner? What is that exactly? I'm kind of curious. And to generate novel ideas and content challenges the long-held values and integrity of scientific endeavors. These challenges make it more difficult for scientists, the larger research community, and the public to, 1, understand and confirm the veracity of generated content review and analyses. Yes, this is one of the biggest challenges. 2, maintain accurate attribution of machine versus human-authored analyses and information. 3, ensure transparency and disclosure of AI in producing research results or textual analyses. 4, enable the replication of studies and analyses. Point on that. We do already have a problem with a replication crisis, and it's just a question of whether or not AI is going to exacerbate it at this point. 5, identify and mitigate biases and inequities introduced by AI algorithms and training data. To protect the integrity of science in the age of generative AI, we call upon the scientific community to remain steadfast in honoring the guiding norms and values of science. We endorse recommendations from a National Academies report that explores ethical issues in computing research and promoting responsible practices through education and training. We also reaffirm the findings of earlier work performed by the National Academies on responsible automated research workflows, which called for human review of algorithms, the need for transparency and reproducibility, and efforts to uncover and address bias. Building upon the prior studies, we urge the scientific community to focus sustained attention on 5 principles of human accountability and responsibility for scientific efforts that employ AI. First off, transparent disclosure and attribution. Scientists should clearly disclose the use of generative AI in research, including specific tools, algorithms, and settings employed. Accurately attribute the human and AI sources of information or ideas. AI doesn't generate an idea because it's always regenerative, not generative, but anyway. Distinguishing between the two and acknowledging their respective contributions, and ensure that human expertise and prior literature are appropriately cited even when machines do not provide such citations in their output. If this is a hinting that you should allow an AI to write the article to begin with, then I'm going flat no. And I will not be kind to scientists who do that themselves if I find out. Model creators and refiners should provide publicly accessible details about models, including the data used to train and refine them. Carefully manage and publish information about models and their variants so as to provide scientists with a means of citing the use of particular models with specificity. Provide long-term archives of models to enable replication studies. Disclose when proper attribution of generated content cannot be provided. And pursue innovations in learning, reasoning, and information retrieval machinery aimed at providing users of those models with the ability to attribute sources of authorship of the data employed in AI-generated content. Point I would make there, both of those are things that should be done regardless of whether or not it's AI or not, because there's lots of different statistical and physical models out there. All of those kinds of things should be done regardless. AI is just an expanded generation of that, as it were. The other challenge, unfortunately, here is when you're talking about something that was created as the result of public funds, there is legalese in there that somewhat requires that you disclose everything somewhere publicly. Like if you create a data set, it's got to be up somewhere publicly. If you create code base or something like that, or like package for programming computing, it has to be available somewhere publicly if you do it on public dollars, i.e. funding from a grant from like a federal agency or something like that. But in the case of private enterprise, that starts to drip into the realm of proprietary information for a company. And so how do you handle that is going to be a serious question mark, because at least currently a number of the most popular AI things are created by private companies and they are proprietary information. So hence the reason there's not necessarily a desire to share the algorithm. Verification of AI-generated content and analyses. Scientists are accountable for the accuracy of their data, imagery, inferences that they draw from the use of generative models. Now, I'm actually going to stop right here and just mention one thing with this, because the rest of this is just about, with AI. But people if you're signing your name to a peer-reviewed article, it's up there. If you're signing your name to a published article, you are vouching for the veracity of everything in it. That everything is true and accurate to the best of your ability. Obviously, people make mistakes. True and accurate to the best of your ability. AI is no different in that you have to account for the accuracy of the data, imagery, and inferences in there. This is just extending that well-known bit of an ethical principle with scientific publishing and scientific research to AI. In other words, if you, who are the scientist, use an AI model in your pursuit of research, whatever you happen to be researching, then you are responsible for the accuracy of everything in it, not the AI. And so that's where we're going with this. This is about an accountability thing, making sure everything that you use is accurate, not just something that's randomly, video generated or something like that. Accountability requires the use of appropriate methods to validate the accuracy and reliability of inferences made by or with the assistance of AI, along with a thorough disclosure of the evidence relevant to such inferences. It includes monitoring and testing for biases in AI algorithms and output with the goal of identifying and correcting biases that could skew research outcomes or interpretations. Now, I will say in this case, they are not necessarily referring to sort of the postmodernist sense of biases and things like that, or psychological biases or anything in there, but algorithmic ones that say, lead you to underestimate, overestimate, things like that in particular ways. So just a note there, this is a little bit different from the sort of psychological bias kind of thing here, and that's not necessarily what they're referring to, though we'll get to that in a moment. Model creators should disclose limitations in the ability of systems to confirm the veracity of any data, text, or images generated by AI. Yes, in here that is a pretty good one in here, and frankly standard not just for AI models, but for all of them. Documentation of AI-generated data. Scientists should mark AI-generated or synthetic data inferences or imagery with provenance information about the role of AI in their generation, so it is not mistaken for observations collected in the real world. Scientists should not present AI-generated content as observations collected in the real world. Model creators should clearly identify, annotate, and maintain provenance about synthetic data used in their training procedures and monitor the issues, concerns, and behaviors arising from the reuse of computer-generated content in training future models. Now, what is this about? Excuse me. What is this about? Goodness. What this has to do with is that, pardon me, I have a bit of a thing going on today. What this is about is that, for example, sometimes there will be other things that you are trying to work with, statistical things and what have you, that they cannot take missing data. Recording station goes down for some odd reason. And there's a period of time where the data is missing. In such cases, at least in the physical sciences, what you might do is use an AI to generate that missing data to fill the gap. That's synthetic data is what we're talking about there. And likewise, you could do the same thing when you're talking about synthetic data to train another model. I.e., you could have AI-generated data that goes into training a different AI model. The issues and concerns that arise from that is what's better known in statistical lingo here as error propagation. It is still a model. It is not perfect. It will not get everything correctly. So that synthetic data created by AI has itself some error to it. And that will propagate through if you're using it to train another model. And so this is where we get to the chaos theory kind of things with it, in that, butterfly flapping its wings creates a hurricane on the other side of the world. Well, if it's a teeny tiny bit of error that you're giving to a model that you're training also, modeled output data that, has an error to it, add it to another model that's used for training, how does that little error explode, become much larger in the second model, or does it? That's the question that we have in there, is a bit of error propagation that goes on with it. And that is a concern, because you're going from one point to another. how wildly different or how wildly inaccurate could the results be if you're training, synthetic data, model 1, model 2, model 3, model 4, all those kinds of things all the way down the line. Because I think if you have even slight errors in old stuff, you're going to end up having some dramatic errors in the newer stuff if the newer stuff is trained on the AI's old stuff. So that is the question that is asked there, but it should be either way, we should be under no foolish notion that, in this case, AI-generated data is not observations, and it should never be assumed as such. It is the result of a model output, effectively, and the model output has error to it. Now, this is the one that caught my interesting attention, as you might guess. Focus on ethics and equity. Scientists and model creators should take steps to ensure that their uses of AI produce scientifically sound and socially beneficial results, while taking appropriate steps to mitigate the risk of harm. This includes advising scientists and the public on handling the trade-offs associated with making certain AI technologies available to the public, especially in light of potential risks stemming from inadvertent outcomes or malicious applications. Now, this I don't necessarily have a problem with, just in terms of a general sense. Because you're putting this thing out there, you don't know how somebody else is going to use it. So you're thinking about what's the bad things that could happen. Fine, fair enough. You think about it, and this is the thing you could do, this is the thing you could not do. All those kinds of things. On the other hand, there's also just the inadvertent bad outcomes that can come from something like this, where somebody's using it to write a paper, to do some quick analysis, to help them make a decision, but they don't necessarily know what they're doing with it. This is most definitely a particular interesting problem and challenge in that it's like somebody who doesn't know very well all the different tools in their toolbox, if they're just starting out as a carpenter. You may be using the wrong tool to do something you think it can do. Same kind of thing here with AI in terms of just the accidental things that could go on, the accidental things that can go on with that. And the same is true of any kind of computing model. If you don't know what you're doing with it, you could end up using it in a way that ends up being more harmful to yourself and whatever goals that you're trying to reach. So I actually don't have a particular problem with that section. In a way, I kind of agree with it. Scientists and model creators should adhere to ethical guidelines for AI use, particularly in terms of respect for clear attribution of observational versus AI-generated sources of data, intellectual property, privacy, disclosure, and consent, as well as the detection and mitigation of potential biases in the construction and use of AI systems. This actually goes back to the earlier thing about the data and observations related stuff, but one thing that's not getting noticed here is copyright in here, except for intellectual property, which maybe it falls under there. They should also continuously monitor other societal ramifications likely to arise as AI is further developed and deployed, and update practices and rules that promote beneficial uses and mitigate the prospect of social harm, I should say. That's the question I had when I was reading it. What the hell is social harm in this? There's no definition given. So I'm like, what the hell is that? Here is the other thing, and this is where I'm going to come back to an old comment here that I've made a few times about AI. Scientists, model creators, and policymakers should promote equity in the questions and needs that AI systems are used to address, as well as equitable access to AI tools and educational opportunities. These efforts should empower a diverse community of scientific investigators to leverage AI systems effectively and to address the diverse needs of communities, including the needs of groups that are traditionally underserved or marginalized. In addition, methods for soliciting meaningful public participation in evaluating equity and fairness of AI technologies and uses should be studied and employed. AI should not be used without careful human oversight in decisional steps of peer review processes or decisions around career advancement and funding allocations. Now, obviously, if we're talking about equity in the postmodernist sense, well, that's great, but we need to think about this carefully. What they're talking about here is the use of AI in answering questions. Now, I will admit, this is one thing that is a true statement. Because we do, public funding of research and different things, the focus of the questions being asked are sometimes driven by who is funding it. Though not always. And oftentimes, you're in the midst of funding something else and you find answers to questions that are not necessarily of interest to the funding entity. Those things do happen also. So it's not like it's impossible with that, but it is not necessarily unreasonable to be concerned about. What questions are being asked and answered as it relates to the funding of different research grants from the different agencies. Fair enough. Or from foundations, because foundations do this too, and they have their interests and needs and those kinds of things that they want answers to related to their own stuff. So it's kind of hard sometimes with all of that. But what is meant by equity and equitable in here is the question that I have with it, because I hesitate to say exactly, they mean this or they mean that, because they just use the word like once. This is actually really the only very few times when the word actually appears. So I question whether or not they mean it in the sense of a postmodernist kind of thing. So that's why I'm not going there with this. But there's a lot of questions I have in here. Well, expand upon it. Can you expand? What do you mean by equity? What do you mean by equitable access? What do you mean by all of these different terms? Give me more than just this. Particularly because one of my concerns is with AI, and has always been, AI is a model. It is only ever as good as the data that is used to train it. And it is only ever as good as the people who create it. And what do I mean by that? Because humans do have their own particular biases. When you're talking about a large language model or something like that, you can, tweak the rules of what it can answer to, and things like that, to come from certain perspectives. And yes, if you've seen things like ChatGPT and what have you, and some of its canned responses in certain things versus other things, you know what I'm talking about. That is a concern also. Are you inadvertently looking to bias an AI in a particular direction? Nothing to say that here, but this goes to that larger concern when you start to bring some of these things in there, and what is the appropriate role in those particular situations. Continuous monitoring, oversight, and public engagement. Scientists, together with representatives from academia, industry, government, and civil society, should continuously monitor and evaluate the impact of AI on the scientific process, and with transparency adapt strategies as necessary to maintain integrity. Because AI technologies are rapidly evolving, research communities must continue to examine and understand the powers, deficiencies, and influences of AI, work to anticipate and prevent harmful uses, I would love to see them define harmful uses a little bit. I took some guesses earlier, but, I'm just curious to see them define it. And harness its potential to address critical societal challenges. AI scientists must at the same time work to improve the effectiveness of AI for the sciences, including addressing challenges with veracity, attribution, explanation, and transparency of training data and inference procedures. Efforts should be undertaken within and across sectors to pursue ongoing study of the status and dynamics of the use of AI in sciences, and pursue meaningful methods to solicit public participation and engagement as AI is developed, applied, and regulated. Results of this engagement and study should be broadly disseminated. Now, they go on here to talk about, we need a council to oversee this and provide some best practices. This isn't over yet, because this is still so new, that it's going to take more than just, an article like this to come up with and I will say this is like a who's who of people in here that's involved. There's a lot of folks. But it's going to take more than an article like this to firmly set what the sort of standards of practice are for working with AI in science. And so it's going to take a while to figure it out, but we're going to have to, because this little mess of our own making is making waves in scientific disciplines, be it social sciences or physical sciences. Well, and physical sciences, it's actually been around and used for a little bit longer than you'd think. But anyway, I digress. Let me know what you think. What should be the recommendations for protecting scientific integrity in the age of AI? What do you think? Let me know. Hit the like button on the way out the door, comment on the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, all that lovely good jazz. Until next time, I'm Adrienne. May you stay curious.